Hi there, and welcome back to Heard Online, your favorite YouTube show in which we take a critical look at claims made about sleep on the World Wide Web to examine whether they're true or not. Today's episode was suggested by Talahat, a member of our Insomnia Immunity program, who sent me a link to this Arianna Huffington interview and said, "Hey, what do you think about this?" And asked, how do you want me to reply? Maybe this could be heard online. And he said, "That sounds good." So here we are now. Do take advantage of the timestamps. I think really the most interesting part of this, this interview and today's Heard Online really comes when Arianna Huffington talks about Aetna, a really big Fortune 500 company, and how they're incentivizing their employees to sleep more. That to me was really interesting. We're going to take a close look at that. And one more thing before we jump into this conversation that we're going to listen to. I understand, of course, that Arianna Huffington here she's not talking about insomnia. She's trying to get a message across to someone who's just not realizing that they're sleep deprived and how that makes them feel and how that affects their health and things of that nature. So I realized that, but what I've always felt is that who is this person? Who is this person who doesn't realize that they're sleep deprived? A great number of humans know that they're sleep deprived, such as parents of young children, or somebody has to work many jobs to make to support themselves. And if you tell them that, hey, you should prioritize sleep, they would just get super upset because they know that, right? And the other group of people are somebody who's like who's like a teenager who likes to play Counter-Strike all night and has to get up for school. Try to tell them that you should prioritize their sleep. That's going to fall on deaf ears. But that said, we're going to talk a little bit about like what I believe is true, that there are humans out there who are sort of mindlessly, I use quotation mark because it's a little judgy word, but let's say mindlessly pursuing success, like whether that's like making more money or fame or like achieving something without necessarily feeling that gives them meaning and it feels something that they truly want to do, that is like a true value for them. And that can of course lead us to burn out. And I think not necessarily because we're not sleeping enough, but because we're not doing something that truly gives us meaning and purpose and it is living our values. And we've seen many times how that person can have this realization that I'm not living the way I would like to live. And they may, take another path and they find more peace and they happen to sleep more and they feel well because they're now on a different trajectory. They're now on a trajectory where they're living their values, they're finding purpose and meaning. And in retrospect, that person often goes like, oh, I wasn't taking care of my sleep. Now I'm sleeping more and everything's better. But that's not the story. It's actually more true, in my opinion, that somebody can be like in this phase of their life where they're doing something that they feel so important, so meaningful, and they happen to sleep quite little because they're building this thing that's so fantastic, and it feels great, even if that person could sleep more, and maybe it wouldn't hurt them to sleep more, right? But they still feel like it's a fantastic part of their life there because they're doing something fantastic and meaningful, even if they're not sleeping an ideal amount. Okay, so a little longer preamble than I intended there, but let's now finally jump into this conversation where we listen to Arianna Huffington. She's guesting Google, and let's hear what they're saying here.
So, can you tell us a bit about your motivation for writing a book about sleep?
So my motivation was that I actually collapsed from sleep deprivation, and on my way down, broke my cheekbone in the corner of my desk. And as I came to in a pool of blood, I had to ask myself the question, if you come to in a pool of blood and nobody has shot you, is that really what success looks like? And so that led to a book I wrote 2 years ago called Thrive. And in Thrive, sleep is a tiny part. And as I went around the world speaking about redefining success and including our well-being and sense of wonder and giving into the definition, what people really wanted to talk about was sleep, because we share it. It's like it's the universal common denominator. You know, you may not want to meditate or wonder or give, but you have to sleep. So I decided to sort of dig deep and make the book very much based on all the latest science about sleep, because it's kind of amazing. Sleep is a very new science. In fact, the first scientific sleep center was founded here at Stanford in 1970. And now there are over 2,500 in the US alone. And the conclusion, as you'll see, there are 1,200 scientific footnotes in the book. You don't have to actually read them. But if you have a partner or a friend who's skeptical about sleep, you can make them read them, because it's kind of unequivocal and conclusive.
I'm just going to pause there and comment on a few things. Firstly, of course, super sorry to hear that she fell and fractured her cheekbone. And now, was that directly caused by sleep deprivation? I don't know. I don't know what happened. And of course, I believe if we're really sleep deprived, it can affect our balance and things of that nature. But that said, there's many of us who have been quite sleep deprived, and we also didn't, fall and fracture ourselves and things of that nature. So, and just putting it out there that it's not necessarily always super easy to pinpoint exactly what made us fall at some point in our lives. But it sounds to me as if the story here of like waking up in a pool of blood, wondering like, is this, am I achieving success? Is this success for me? And then writing this book, Thrive. To me, this sounds like the story of somebody who has this kind of realization that I'm not really living the way that I would like to, according to my values, according to what brings me meaning. And just I don't want to repeat what I said in the intro. So just this to me is the story of what I share there in the intro. Now, the other thing was, isn't it interesting that when she went out to talk about this book called Thrive, what people wanted to talk about was sleep. They really wanted to talk about sleep because, I guess that was a chapter in her initial book. And to me, that's a story of how prevalent insomnia is. I think when somebody's like, I want to hear more about sleep, that doesn't necessarily come from just casual curiosity. I think that mainly comes from somebody who is struggling, who is wondering, how can I sleep more? Why I'm not sleeping more? Or for the matter of, maybe to some degree, somebody who's kind of like into like biohacking, like I need to optimize everything in my life. True. But to a large degree, to me, this is a reflection of how prevalent insomnia is out there in the world. Now, another thing to comment on here was the mention of how many sleep centers there are. And I would say that, the vast majority of them are actually like, they're clinical. They're there to diagnose obstructive sleep apnea. So it can sound, when you hear this, that, oh my gosh, there are thousands and thousands of centers that, investigate sleep and look at sleep and try to understand sleep. But that's not really accurate. The vast majority are clinical. And then finally here, she mentions having 1,200 footnotes in her book, which is a lot, and that, gives us the impression that, okay, this must be thoroughly researched and everything in this book must then be really like fact checked and accurate, etc. And we'll, I'm just pointing that out as we will hear some common themes that we know are not necessarily true further on. Let's keep going.
If the science is in, sleep is not negotiable.
Oh yeah. I wanted to comment on this thing as well. She's saying here that this is it, people, sleep is non-negotiable. And the way it's portrayed here, it can seem like, oh, there must be a lot of people out there who think that sleep is just completely negotiable. Like, we don't need sleep. It's kind of like it's a nice to have, but it's totally optional. But who is that person? Like, do you know anybody? If you ask them, like, do you think sleep is optional or not optional? Who would say, oh, it's totally optional? I think, I don't even need it. I do it if I feel like it here and there. We humans, we feel naturally that sleep is something that, you know, we need to have. That's kind of our baseline. That's culture. That's what most people think. And I've mentioned this in the past that I did this like study where I asked you know, random people on Amazon to rate how important they thought sleep was and how much you should sleep, and if they thought there were any problems if you didn't sleep. And like random people out there, I think we had about 200 people who took this survey, and there was one outlier. One person said something a little bit different, but you know, it was very much unanimous. Everybody thought sleep is really important. If you don't sleep enough, you're going to have health issues. So to me, I think it's not necessarily my version of the universe, where there are a lot of people out there who think sleep is optional. I'm like, who are those people? Do they actually exist? I haven't met, I would say any. I haven't met any so far. So just a little comment on that. Now let's keep going here.
It's not something you can choose to do or not do unless you have a genetic mutation. About 1% of the population has a genetic mutation, and they can do great on 4 or 5 hours sleep. I don't have that genetic mutation, and you cannot train yourself to have a genetic mutation. But there is actually a choice before your children are born. You have 2 children, but if you want to have a third one and you want them to be a short sleeper, I don't know why you would, but if you do, you can do gene editing. Before the baby is born. Once the baby is born, the die is cast, that's it. 7 to 9 hours. Where you are in that spectrum is individual, but 7 to 9.
So, you know, what I hear in this section is Arianna Huffington saying that basically we all need to sleep between 7 to 9 hours. That's the non-negotiable, unless you have this genetic mutation. And to me, reality is more like this. Firstly, there is ample evidence. There's ample evidence, very consistent evidence that we humans, when objectively, you know, when this is objectively measured with EEG, we sleep on average about 6 hours, something like that. You know, 6 hours, 10 minutes, 6 hours, 20 minutes on average. It has been very well documented. So that's when I hear this, I'm like confused. There are 1,200 footnotes, but why do you say 7 to 9 hours if you've done like all this research that shows that the true number that we actually sleep is much less than that? You know, that comes to mind. And also, I think sleep, like anything else, is like a bell-shaped curve, or like some kind of spectrum where you know, some people sleep less, some people sleep more, and those who sleep less may have a genetic mutation. Well, don't we all like don't we all have like a little bit like different genes? Isn't like our genetic material, isn't that expressed in how much we sleep? So I think this whole thing about like if you may have a special limitation, I think it's a little confusing, and it takes us away from the fact that we're all different. There's all a spectrum. We all have like different genes, right? Something like that is how I see the world. So yeah, that's a little comment on that. Let's keep going. Oh, and of course, this whole genetic, like, what did you call it? That you can change your children's genes before they're born. I've never heard of that being possible. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's not something that's doable at all.
So what is the revolution itself?
So the revolution is really changing the culture, because we are all living under the collective delusion, and you experience it more than anywhere here in the Valley, that in order to succeed, you have to burn out. It's like that's the delusion of our culture. I mean, you go into companies and you see people being congratulated for working 24/7. People were being busy like a badge of honor. People say, you know, she's amazing. She's always on. She returns texts and emails right away. And we need to change that. We need to change how we hear something like that. So now if I hear someone say, you know, she's amazing, she's always on, I think, that's a problem. You know, and it's a problem on many levels. It's a problem because at some point that someone on person is going to burn out mathematically. And what the form the burnout takes, will vary. It can be a collapse like mine. It can be a health issue. It can be any number of things. Even a lot of the accidents that happen that we think are accidents are really because our immune system is down, or we're not paying attention, etc. And the other thing is that this whole building is like a celebration of creativity. YouTube is sort of a celebration of creators. So the first thing that gets degraded if you're sleep deprived is your creativity. You can still be transactional. You can still go to meetings and pay attention with half your brain and make notes and show up. But really, the part of you that really comes up with innovative, game-changing ideas, which is what you're all about, is not functioning as well. So we need to kind of rethink our whole idea of what it means to be optimally performing. And you know what I love? That athletes who are all about performance and winning are now prioritizing sleep and renewal and recharging. I write a lot about Andre Iguodala in the book because he actually tracked his stats after he started getting 8 hours sleep. And it's just amazing to see the immediate impact on performance. So sleep as a performance enhancer. Now, sleep is a lot more than that. But I don't really care why you start getting enough sleep. Whatever your entry point is, take it. One of the lines in the book is come for the performance enhancing benefits, stay for the life enhancing benefits.
Now here there's a lot of things to go through, but on the last note here, again, I won't say I haven't studied this literature in depth at all, but we have many evidences, many cases of people on our own channel who's done amazing, even though they were really sleep deprived. Brittany, for example, completed an Ironman triathlon. And we also have a really interesting example of Karsten Wigholm, I believe it is, the Norwegian runner who really smashed the world record in the previous Olympic after not sleeping whatsoever. So the whole idea of sleep being like, that we can't we can't perform well from an athletics standpoint on little sleep. I think I really question whether that is scientifically backed. But now, one part where I can really see something that I agree with here is where Arianna Huffington says, like, she talks about burnout and how, maybe we need to think about how we're approaching things as a society, because burnout is a real thing and it's a very, very common thing. But the part where I don't think I see the things the same way is that Arianna seems to think that burnout is a simple result of how many hours we work, or how much we're on, when I think it has much more to do with how we value our work. If you're working, if you're starting a new company, which is like really, something she did herself, like you're starting a new company that you think is going to change the world. This is so fantastic, so meaningful to you. And you happen to be working like, 16 hours a day, you may feel fantastic. You may be incredibly far from burnout. The furthest away you can be from burnout, because your work is so meaningful, right? On the flip side, you can work, 6 hours a day, but you feel the work you're doing is completely like, it has no purpose. It doesn't feel meaningful at all. And you have no control over what you're doing. That is what I believe it creates burnout. And I think it's very tricky when you're in this kind of corporate setting, and then like, oh, we're going to prevent burnout by doing, by having this like seminar on this and that. It really doesn't help. I think what helps is making people feel like what you're doing is really valuable. It's something helpful for society. And when you throw sleep into the mix there, it gets like even more confusing. And by the way, like now, in the beginning of the story, she said that I was so sleep deprived that I fell. But now, she's describing that fall more as a collapse, as part of like being burned out. There may be an emotional component here that we didn't really see in the beginning. And then finally, this quite interesting how she mentioned that our immune system may be down, and that creates more accidents. I don't know how that can happen, but that was just a little thing that struck me as I was hearing that. Okay, let's keep going.
And for me, the biggest life enhancing benefit is actually bringing joy into what you're doing. Because I feel we're also blessed to have jobs we love, to be living here. And so often, I know for myself, when I'm sleep deprived, I may still get things done, but the joy is gone. I kind of drag myself through the day. I just go through the motions, but I'm not really in it.
Yes, you're sleepwalking.
And this part, I totally agree with it. Like when we find joy in what we're doing, that's when we're not, our risk of burnout, I think it's not even there. But I don't think it has so much to do with sleep deprivation, as I just talked about. And the part of creativity here, I think, is also, I think I may not see things the same way here either. I think a lot of things that's going on in Silicon Valley, a lot of the amazing startups there probably happened when people were quite sleep deprived. They probably worked very, very hard in the beginning and still were very, very creative and created these amazing things, right? So yeah, now let's skip ahead. I think this was the first sort of 10 minutes here. They talked about sleep and her book. And then they talked a little bit about different things, but we're going to go to the 27th minute. Let's go to minute 27 here. And this was really, really interesting to me. And one of those things that you don't know if you should laugh or cry when you hear it, but she's talking about somebody who is on her board, I think, and who's also CEO of a company called Aetna. So yeah, here it is. Let's listen to this together. And as we're waiting for this to load here.
And a pioneer in this area is Mark Bertolini, the CEO of Aetna, who is actually going to be joining the board of my new company. And I don't know if you saw the latest thing he's done. No. He introduced his program at Aetna, and if employees are given Fitbits to track their sleep, and if they get 7 hours or more for 20 nights, they are given $300.
Wow.
When I heard this, I was like, really? They're doing that? And, if you're familiar with our channel, you probably see why that can be so very tricky. But I actually wanted to show you some, some scientific evidence here that backs up like what we kind of know intuitively, that the more you incentivize someone, the more tricky it is. Like, let's take a quick look here at a study from, we're just going to look at really like the title and maybe the introduction and maybe the abstract, but this is a study from Journal of Sleep Research from 2014 titled High Intention to Fall Asleep Causes Sleep Fragmentation. And what they're hypothesizing here is that, and what they're doing is that they took 33 people with no sleep problems, and they provided motivational instructions, and the experimenter insisted on the importance of falling asleep as quickly as possible and promised a financial reward. And they saw that this was associated with increased waking after sleep onset, number of awakenings, fragmented sleep, etc. So this is just, I just wanted to show you this because it's I haven't reviewed this in depth, but I believe this is not the first time at all that this has been shown. When you incentivize somebody to sleep, their sleep actually becomes more fragmented. They sleep not as well. So when I heard that a big company is going to actually give people money to sleep more, I was like, oh my goodness. I don't think that that's going to lead where they want things to go. But I thought this was, super interesting, but also a little bit concerning as well, where things are heading.
So it's not just the financial incentive. Can you imagine how revolutionary that is? That the CEO of a Fortune 500 company is telling you that getting enough sleep is good for business.
And it kind of gets even more tricky, right? Now it's like, you know, your boss is telling you need to sleep more because that's going to affect the bottom line, which creates like, you know, so much pressure to sleep that, yeah, so tricky. But I haven't heard anything more of this. I haven't heard this happening in other companies. So, you know, do let me know if you heard any such thing. All right. So with that said, we're going to go to the last part of this that I wanted to check in on. And it is, oh yeah. It's this part where she, you know, Arianna says that she's a kind of like, she wants to give the audience a tip here. Let's see what her tip is.
Getting more
that
sleep
sounds
tonight. And since you have the book, you'll see the second part of the book is all about best practices and simple tips and techniques. But please don't go straight to that, because the key thing is to convince yourself by reading all the latest scientific findings of how important it is.
And that part, that's the last part I'm going to comment on. It was just another time where I'm like, really, is that really what we want to do? Is like do we really think that what's really going to make people sleep well is looking at the latest scientific articles and convince yourself that sleep is super, super duper important for your health, for your well-being, for everything else, that really lead to peaceful sleep? When we just looked at this article that said that, you know, high intention to sleep actually causes problem sleeping, I think that, you know, that tip doesn't necessarily where we want things to go. But yeah, I hope you find these episodes valuable and interesting and helpful. And let me know in the comments what you think, as always. And yeah, I'll just stop there. Again, super nice having you here. Hope you found this interesting, and look forward to seeing you soon again. Bye for now.